Now, just in case you didn't know, Dawa USA has officially launched 2 quote-unquote new bait finesse reels for the American market. Now, compared to Shimano, they're pretty late to the bait finesse party, but they have come out with these reels right at the peak of, I guess, bait finesse popularity. Now, these reels are called the PX BF70, and of course the reel we're featuring in today's video, that's going to be the Tatula BF70, and of course BF stands for bait finesse. Now, I'm not sure why Daiwa chose to use the BF designation instead of using their trademark Air designation for their bait finesse reels that they do in other countries. I suspect there's probably some kind of trademark issues as the reasoning for that. So instead of a Tatula Air, we get the Tatula BF70. Now, with these 2 quote-unquote new bait finesse reels, Daiwa actually has, I think, either 9 or 10 bait finesse reels available globally. And let's count them down. So in 2020 came the STEEZ Air TW, and also in 2020 came the Alphas Air TW. And then shortly after that came the Gekabidjan Air, and then the Silver Creek. Then I believe the Salamandura Air came out for China. And then I believe came the SLP Works Millionaire, which is like a limited edition reel, so I'm not sure if that's available. And then came the 2023 SS Air TW. And then of course the new PX BF70, and then this Tatula BF70, so I think that makes 9. Now, there's a lot of overlap in these models, but it's good to see that Daiwa is giving the consumer a variety of choice, and the 2 standouts on this list are going to be that Salamandura Air and this Tatula BF70, and I'm going to show you why later on in the video. Now, let's just quickly go over, I guess, the design and specs of this reel before we get into the important stuff. Now, the color and styling is typical Daiwa. You're looking at a dark color with a red spool, and then some kind of a extra red accent, which in this case is going to be the handle nut. Now, the finish is going to be this matte satin, which looks really nice. Now, I do prefer a gloss finish, but this Daiwa satin finish actually feels really good in hand. Reminds me a lot of the CURADO 200K satin finish. So it looks good and it feels good. Now you can see it's got a chrome thumb bar. It's got the Daiwa eye-shaped knobs with the black knob end caps. I think they should have been chrome personally. It's got this ugly plastic nut retainer. I believe the drag star, while typical Daiwa design, is probably graphite. It does not say Zion anywhere. Now, on the other side, we got the cool stealth spider logo underneath the Daiwa Vector logo. Now, that looks cool. I like that. And since this is a Tatula, we have a fully exposed brake dial. Now, I'm not going to compare sizes of this reel with other reels because I've done it many times before in other videos with the reels this Tatula is based off of, but palming it, I can definitely feel the brake dial, but I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue when fishing. Now, it's got a very long, for bait finesse, 90mm aluminum handle, and it's got the zero adjuster, and this is plastic. Now, let's do the old zero adjuster test. Now, usually with Daiwa bait finesse reels, they have a hint of side-to-side play, at least the ones that I've gotten, and this one has no side-to-side play. Now, it doesn't seem to stop the spool from free spinning pretty good. Yep, brakes are on 0. But there is no side-to-side play. So I don't know if I want to adjust that to have a little bit or not when I do the cast testing, but I guess that's just going to depend on if I feel underwhelmed by its performance and also what the brake looks like. Now, as far as the on-paper specs, I'm just going to let you look at the box right here. It's only going to come in at 8.1:1 gear ratio. It's supposed to weigh 6.3 ounces. Max drag 3.5 kilo or 7.7 pounds, so very finesse oriented drag. Hopefully the startup is smooth. There's the inches per turn, 5 ball bearings, and I don't know if that's 5 and 2 plus 1 for a total of 8, but there's the line capacity. Looks like they don't want you to use line more than 8 pounds, which is pretty standard for bait finesse. But then we have all this other stuff here. T-wing system and hyperdrive design. So let's talk about that. Now naturally this reel is fitted with Daiwa's famous or infamous T-wing line guide. But the next standout feature is going to be the hyperdrive. Now I just want to clear this up because I've seen some videos where people talk about hyperdrive and they get it all wrong. Hyperdrive has nothing to do with the casting performance. I know it sounds like it does, but it doesn't. Now with Daiwa, there's actually 2 levels of hyperdrive. They have the upper level, which is reserved for the more expensive reels, and then they have the lower tier, which is what is on this Tatula BF70. Now on the, I guess, lower tier of hyperdrive, what you're going to get is a metal frame and metal handle side plate. And in the Tatula's case, that's going to be aluminum. You're going to get what they call the Hyper Digigear, which I believe in this iteration they are touting like bigger than average teeth. And you're going to get what they call the Hyper Tough Clutch, which is, I guess, a tougher thumb bar. Now let's talk about this real quick. Now my particular reel has a very sloppy, look at that movement, I don't know if you can see it, very sloppy feeling thumb bar. Even when it's depressed all the way, you can see it's wobbling and shaking, and it doesn't feel very good to depress the thumb bar. It's very shaky, non-quality feeling. Now I have several other Daiwa reels that share the same frame and platform, and so far all of them have had really solid, non-mushy, non-sloppy thumb bars. For example, here's my Tatula 80, has a far less fancy, just plain black thumb bar, and it feels great. So I guess the quality control in Daiwa's Thailand factory is kind of slipping. It's very, very disappointed. Now, I am tempted to try to exchange this, but I think it'll be more trouble than what it's worth. And hopefully most of the other Tatula BF70 reels will not have this issue. And let me know in the comments if you have one of these reels and how is your thumb bar. So now it's time to get into the important stuff, which of course is going to be this spool. So of course, before we get into the spool and the brakes, we're going to get a quick weight on the Tatula BF. And if you remember, on the box it said 6.3 ounces, but incidentally on Daiwa USA's website it says 6.5. So let's see what's up. 6.38. So technically 6.3 ounces. Now that's pretty light by today's standards when it comes to average bait casters, but when it comes to bait finesse, that's actually on the heavier side, as we have reels now that are approaching the high 3 ounces. But trust me, out on the water you're not really going to feel that this reel is too heavy. So the spool scale's out, and in order to access the spool on this Tatula, we gotta undo this screw. Let's see if I'm gonna be able to do it with just my thumbnail. Alright, luckily I'm able to loosen it with a thumbnail. Don't need any kind of special tool or coin. Basically you just turn this screw until it just pops out a little bit. Boom, right there. So you can see it's spring loaded but I think, yeah, you twist it down and then pow. Here's the spool and the brake system. So I'm gonna lay this off to the side and we're gonna take a look at this spool. So this spool is supposed to be made of the A7075 aluminum, which is supposed to be lower spec than the G1 Duralumin, which a lot of the higher end Daiwa BFS reels spools are made of. But you can see here, it's got a long spool shaft, Shimano style, and it looks to be made of steel and not aluminum. And whoa, look at that. We'll get more into this in a moment, but yeah, it's pretty ported. And this is the same spool that you get in the Chinese market Salamandura Air. And I think I know how much this weighs because I saw Jimmy over at Roar Fishing weighing the spool on his Salamandura, but just in case you didn't know, let's go ahead and get a weight. Boom, look at that, 10.84. Now it's a little bit lighter than I was expecting. I thought it was going to be like 11 grams, but yeah, 10.84 grams for a bait finesse spool. Spool is fairly shallow, but even back in 2016, 10.8 grams for a BFS spool would have been extremely heavy. I believe this is about the same weight as the current Shimano ALDEBARAN MGL 30 spool, which is not a BFS reel. So what makes this spool so different versus the other Daiwa BFS spools? Well, that's going to be the size, specifically the diameter. Now, all of Daiwa's other BFS reel spools sport the very small micro 28mm diameter, while the Tatula BF70, as well as the Salamandura Air, they are sporting 30mm diameter spools, and you can definitely tell the difference. This is a spool of my Gekabijin Air, by the way, but they're the same width it looks like, but the Salamandura spool is going to be 2mm taller at 30mm, which is about the average for today's current BFS reels. So this reel may be able to long cast heavier upper end BFS lures better than reels like the Gekabijin or Alphas or SS Air due to the bigger spool. But now let's check out these brakes. Now this is probably the biggest, most popped out rotor I've seen on a Daiwa reel in a long time, probably ever. So in case you didn't know, the rotor, or this thing right here, they call it the rotor inductor or inductor cup, this is the key to how a Daiwa baitcaster is going to perform. And this thing is massive, look at that. So if you compare it with the Gekabijin, you can see just how much bigger it is, how much more it sticks out. So that tells me this reel should have some extremely potent brakes. But the next question is, what kind of brake system does it have? Is it going to be Mag Force Z, or is it going to be Daiwa's air brake, which is featured on their SV reels and most of their Air BFS reels? So to figure out which system it is, what we're going to do is we're going to see if this rotor twists. So it should pull out just like a Mag Force Z, but if it twists, it's going to be the air brake. Yep, it does twist. So the characteristics of the air brake system is going to be a twisting rotor and a very weak spring. So the fact that this rotor twists out and the spring is so weak means that Daiwa reels with the air brake system generally don't cast as far as other reels, because this rotor pops out immediately and it stays popped out all the way till the end of the cast once the spool stops, and then it'll pop back in. And for those of you who have Daiwa SV reels, you probably may have heard that pop sound like this once the lure hit the water and the spool stopped. That's that rotor finally popping back in. So in the grand scheme of things, with today's current bait finesse reels, I do believe this Tatula has the heaviest spool out of all of the spools that I've weighed, coming in at even heavier than the Xenon LTX. Now, one thing about Daiwa reels is what I call spool cross compatibility. That means that spools of various different reels like the STEEZ and the ZILLION, they are compatible with each other. So you can stick a shallower, lighter STEEZ spool and put it into the current ZILLION and it'll work. And the benefit of this is, of course, you save a whole lot of money by just buying a spool instead of a whole reel, and you can change the casting characteristics of your reel by swapping in lighter, shallower spools or deeper, heavier spools. And of course, a lot of these reels have different breaking characteristics. So some of you guys may be thinking that since this Tatula BF70 is basically the same reel as the Tatula 80, you may be thinking you can just buy a BF70 spool and just pop it into the Tatula 80 and get yourself a bait finesse reel on the cheap. Well, unfortunately for you guys, that's not going to work. Now, with the Tatula 80, if I can just pull this screw off, pull the spool out. The spool on the Tatula 80 is actually 32 millimeters in diameter versus 30. You can definitely see the size difference. So when you try to put this BF70 spool into the Tatula 80, it fits this way, but you can definitely see the gap there. And you're gonna have a whole lot of problems. You can definitely see it on this side as well. So unfortunately, no spool compatibility with the Tatula 80. Now with the Tatula 70, it may work, but if I'm not mistaken, the Tatula 70 has a short spool shaft. You'll have to take that plastic piece out that runs into the pinion and it may work, but don't quote me on that. So with the addition of this new Tatula BF70, I have a grand total of 5 Daiwa BFS reels. So not too bad for a quote-unquote Daiwa hater. And let me show you what I got. The oldest Daiwa BFS reel I have is the original SS Air, and then the 2020 Alphas Air, and then the Gekabijin Air, and to round it all off, the current highest spec Daiwa BFS reel in the world, the new SS Air TW. So look at all these reels. Can you tell them apart if I didn't show you which reel was which? I mean, the Gekabijin has the black spool but got the red trim piece, but look at that. Black or dark gray and red. The running theme with Daiwa's bait finesse reels. Now, if you give me 1,000 likes on this video, I will take all 5 of these reels out to the casting field and we're gonna see what's what. So if you want to see which is the longest casting current Daiwa bait finesse reel, and we'll throw in the old SS Air, give me 1,000 likes. So to wrap this video up, let's talk about, I guess, my future plans for the Tatula BF70. Now a lot of you guys are probably wondering, where is the arch rival for this reel, the CURADO counterpart from Shimano, and that of course is the CURADO BFS. And don't worry, these two reels are going to be going head to head against each other in a couple of different categories, or I guess styles of BFS fishing. And I have a trip coming up down to Florida, and I'm probably gonna string both of these reels up with 8-pound fluoro and do some BFS bass fishing. Then of course, if it doesn't get too hot, I'm gonna take them out and they're gonna do battle on the casting field. And then I'm going to compare the reel performance wise up against the 2020 Alphas Air TW, or here in America it's known as the PX BF70. Maybe I'll do a cast battle, maybe I won't, depends on the weather. But the first thing I plan on doing is a, I guess, casting impressions video. I want to see what that big air brake rotor does, how it affects performance. Maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing, and that's going to be next. So there we go guys, all the important things you need to know about the new Daiwa USA Tatula BF70. Thanks a lot.